Hey gang, alright, let's do the president. Knock him out of the park here. Um, so there's the slides that are on PowerPoint. One thing to notice about the slides, and I'll mention this in other videos too. Check if you open up the slides and look through the slides, sometimes there are notes underneath the slide that may or may not be useful in explaining something that's on the slide. I don't have them underneath all of them. I may add, well, for some of the subjects coming up, I'll definitely add a couple more because a little more explanation is needed for them, but for y'all to have. But something to look out for. Anyway, so the president, let's talk about that person. Basic requirements: be a naturalized U.S. citizen. You have to be born here. You can serve only 2 terms. Each term is 4 years long. And there have been 44 presidents. The president's the head of the executive branch, and is also in command of the military. Fairly simple stuff. Slightly more complicated. How do we get a president? Well, we get a president through the Electoral College. When we go to vote for a president, we're voting indirectly for the president. We're actually voting for a slate of electors, a group of people that will go to the Electoral College and vote for a candidate. Now, when North Carolina voted for Obama in 2008, we were actually voting for the group of people that would vote for Obama at the Electoral College. When we voted for Romney in 2012, we were voting for Mitt Romney's electors that were going to go and vote for him at the Electoral College. Now, just because we send an Obama elector to the Electoral College, it doesn't mean that that person has to then vote for Obama, or a Romney elector have to vote for Romney. The electors theoretically can vote for whoever they want to, but generally they don't. They follow what the state popular vote was. Alright? It has happened before, but doesn't happen very often. Each state gets a certain number of electors that they send. How do we determine which state or how many electors each state gets? It's based upon the state's congressional representation. So every state has at least 3 electors. 2 electors because they have 2 members in the Senate, and 1 elector because every state has at least 1 representative in the House of Representatives. So it's based upon congressional representation. However, some states have more people, more representatives in the House of Representatives, and those states will have more electors. North Carolina has 15. It has 2 senators and 13 representatives. Texas has 38 electors. It has 2 people in the Senate and 36 members of the House of Representatives. New York has 29. 2 senators and 27 members of the House of Representatives, etc., so on and so forth. So, with regards to the Electoral College, it's kind of a weird way, maybe some people may think that, to do things. What do we do? The very beginning of the semester, I asked everybody if they liked chocolate, vanilla, or candy, or something like that. Yeah, it was chocolate, vanilla, or candy, and whichever one, chocolate, vanilla, or candy, won the most votes out of. I put you onto groups, and whichever one won the most votes out of that group got actually all the votes. And in 2 of the 3 classes, it ended up that the last place total vote getter ended up winning the electoral vote. So the let's say chocolate got 9 total votes, candy got 10, and vanilla got 11 total votes. In 2 of the 3 classes, chocolate won because the chocolate's 9 votes were distributed amongst the groups in such a way that they won more groups, essentially. Think of the electoral colleges can be a little similar to gerrymandering, in that gerrymandering, you're putting, the goal is to put as many people that support the opposition party. So if you're a Republican, you want to put as many Democrats as possible into one district, making that district a super Democratic district, like turbo major Democratic district. If you could, the goal would be to make that one district 100% Democrat and 0% Republican. Why would you want to do such an insane thing if you are a Republican? Because then that means the rest of the Republican voters would be spread out among the rest of the districts, and the Republicans would hold a majority in, let's say, the other 6 in this metaphorical state. So you have 1 Democrat and 6 Republicans going to the House, as opposed to, let's say, 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. The Electoral College, we can see it operating in kind of the same way. Some states are really filled up with members of one political party. Other states are evenly distributed. However, whoever wins the state gets, all the electors from that state. When we look at the country, in the last couple of elections, Obama won 54 to 46 approximately in 2008, and 51 to 47, almost 52 to 47, something like that, in 2012. Slightly more Democrats, but the country, at least the voters, are somewhat split. But the way the population happens to split across the nation is you got a whole crap ton of Republican voters in Utah. You got a whole crap ton of Republican voters in Wyoming and Idaho and Kansas and Oklahoma and increasingly Missouri, Alabama, Arkansas. Really, these states really concentrated with Republican voters. Now, you go to states like, hold on, vote presidential election. You go to states like, okay, Florida, for example, pretty evenly divided. Obama was able to win. Connecticut and Delaware are really safe Democratic states. However, Democrats win those states 56, 57, 58, 59%, instead of Mitt Romney, Republican. let's see, instead of Idaho, which Mitt Romney got 65% of the vote, right? Nebraska, does it have a total? 60% of the vote for Mitt Romney. Utah, 72% of the vote. West Virginia, Wyoming, 62 and 68 respectively. The states Democrats won, we see a lot more. 52, Nevada, 51, New Hampshire, 58, New Jersey, 52, New Mexico, 63, New York, 51, Ohio, 54. The liberal bastion, those dirty, pot-smoking, authority-bucking hippies in Oregon, 54% of the vote for Obama. Pennsylvania, 52% of the vote, supposedly. These are not like super overwhelming victories, right? But these are states where like the outcome was never really in doubt. Pretty much knew Obama was going to win Pennsylvania, Oregon. What's some of the other close states? New Hampshire, we knew Obama was going to win Nevada as we got even closer to the election. It became clear Obama was going to win Virginia within the last month, even though he only took it with 51% of the vote. So again, we have the situation in the Electoral College where Republicans are very heavily concentrated in certain states. Democrats, though, happen to be just properly spread out across the nation, where they end up getting more electoral votes, or they have a better chance of getting more electoral votes. Kind of similar to how you might do redistricting, except, of course, nobody drew the states up to favor Democrats in this case. That leads to two important pieces of information. Number one, Republicans theoretically hold an inherent advantage in the Electoral College. Why? You just said Democrats had the advantage. I'm glad you asked. Here's why. Montana has 3 electoral votes. North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming all have 3 electoral votes. They also have very small populations. New York has a very large population and it has 29 electoral votes. Now, you may think, well, New York holds more sway because it has more electoral votes, right? Well, kind of, but there's another piece there. There are more people per electoral vote in New York than in Montana. What I mean by this is, in New York, each electoral vote represents probably roughly 700,000 people. In Montana, each electoral vote represents probably about 300,000 people. Republicans need to win less, or need to get less people's votes. They don't need to win as many votes as the Democrats do to win an election. Again, theoretically, because the states that Republicans carry are the states that have less people, where each electoral vote represents less people, so those states have disproportionate advantage over the other states. I hope that makes sense. Because Republicans win small states, they have an advantage because they don't need to win as many votes to win a lot of electoral votes, popular votes to win a lot of electoral votes. However, just like gerrymandering can give one party a huge advantage in one district but make them lose all the other districts in a state, Democrats have managed to spread themselves out across the country in such a way that seems to give them a growing advantage in the Electoral College. Republicans are concentrated in a few states. Well, they win most of the states. But they're concentrated in low population states, whatever. Democrats, their votes, because it's a winner-take-all system in each state, all the Democrats need to do is get 50.1% of the vote in a state. You know what, let me just take that back, because if there are 3 people running, then you might have under 50%. Basically, all the Democrats need to do is win a plurality of the vote. All they have to do is win the most votes out of any other candidate, and they win the state. Right? So Democrats win 51, 52 to 55 or so percent of the vote pretty consistently in Pennsylvania. But they always win that much in Pennsylvania. So they always win Pennsylvania. So the states, New Hampshire, Bush took it in 2000. He took it barely, but it's becoming more Democratic, and again, it's a close Democratic state, but it's pretty consistently Democratic. Iowa, pretty consistently Democratic state, but barely, but Democrats feel pretty confident there. New Mexico is another state that's like that, etc. So when you look at the number of states that Democrats either know they're going to win or, can feel pretty confident that the state at the very least leans their way, the Democrats either have already won the Electoral College or are very close to winning it. So if you're answering that on an exam, hopefully that provides some information. There's a link, the Democratic Safe Votes. You can look at that and see how many states have gone consistently Democratic since 1992 versus Republican. Presidential powers. So the president is the head of the executive branch. The president gets to appoint people to the head of the executive branch. So the president has what's called the cabinet. These are, they're the executive branch agencies like the Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation, etc. It's the president's cabinet. The president gets to appoint people to his cabinet, gets to appoint people to run those agencies. Those people then run the agencies, which is in effect how the government is run through the presidential appointments. The president gets to appoint the person to run the cabinet. However, the Senate has to confirm that person. It's one of the very big presidential powers, and that's how the president exercises control over the executive branch. The president can exercise control over the judicial branch by appointing judges to judgeships, to courts. For example, the Supreme Court, obviously being the most famous one. President appoints somebody to the Supreme Court. The Senate, though, has to vote to say, okay, he can be on there or she can be on there. The president is in command of the military. He's the commander-in-chief. This means that the president sets the policies for the military. The president doesn't necessarily go on the ground himself and direct troops into specific areas to win victory. Obama can't do that. He doesn't have any training. What Obama can do, though, is say, these are, we're allies with France, Britain, Germany, Spain, Italy, whatever. You know what would be a bad foreign policy move is to use our military and invade any of those countries. The president has control of the military in that way. The president can say, go invade this area or that area. I actually wonder what would happen if Obama ordered the U.S. military to invade England. I have a hard time thinking that the soldiers would actually do that. But you never know. I don't know. If I got that order, I probably would be like, what? This doesn't seem right. Anyway. The president tells the military what to do in accordance with international treaties, what America's foreign policy is going to be, and domestic policy and domestic feelings, and what the country wants. The commanders of the military then fulfill the wishes of the president in the way that's most efficient to do so. The president is voted on by all of the people in the country. This gives the president a mandate. It gives the president the ability to speak for all Americans. Nobody else in the country is voted on. No other elected official is voted on by all the people except the president and the vice president. But the president's the one that matters. Nobody cares about the vice president. Because the president is voted on by all the people, the president gets to at least legitimately claim that he represents all the American people. Listen, I was voted on by the American people. The American people liked my agenda, so they voted for me. So listen to what I say. Of course, it doesn't matter that 47 or 46% of them didn't vote for you, because the majority did, and so therefore all of them did, right? Did. So with the power to speak for the American people, the president has these informal powers. For example, the power of the bully pulpit, where the president can run around the nation and has the legitimacy to run around the nation and talk to people and try and raise support for his initiatives, try and move the American populace in one direction or another. And like I said, he's got like a legitimate claim. President is from Hawaii/Chicago, but the president can go down to Miami, Florida and say, let's build a monorail. Right? The president can do that, and the people in Miami won't, look at each other and be very confused about what he's doing there, because he represents the entire nation. Now, if Kay Hagan went down to Miami and started chanting monorail, 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 they would wonder what the hell's going on, right? Okay. So, power of the bully pulpit, he can go around, talk to a bunch of people all around the country, and he has the legitimacy to be there. He also has that power of the legislative initiative. That comes kind of from two areas. He's got that mandate power by being voted on by all the people. So he can push agendas. He can say, I was voted on by everybody. This is what my people want, right? He can say, the American people have spoken. I said, let's have socialized health care with death panels. Make it happen. And people, at the very least, have to take him seriously. He also, though, has that legislative initiative power. That's my phone. He also has that legislative initiative power because, one, he's a single person that has something to do with legislation. He has to sign it into law, and it's much easier to pay attention to one person and hear their ideas and have them organize things, and trying to have 535 Congress people do the same thing. So the president can direct Congress to do some things, simply because it's better organization. Also, the president has the power to veto any law that Congress passes. So unless Congress has a huge majority, 2/3, that support a bill, they're going to need to do what the president wants. They're going to need to pass a bill that the president likes. Otherwise, the president will just veto it. So because of that, the president has the power to drive legislation, to sort of put parameters on a bill and say, I want X, Y, and Z out of this immigration reform bill. Right? We talked a little bit about the cabinet. Part of the reason why we have an increasingly large cabinet and increasingly large executive branch is because the world's gotten more complicated, and we need a larger government to efficiently run that more complicated world. We didn't have pollution issues. Well, we had pollution issues, but they weren't seen in the same way, or they weren't as acute as they in like 1800 as they are in today. So we didn't really need the EPA, whereas today we need the EPA. And so we need another branch, another executive agency, another bureaucratic agency to do some regulation and stuff to make sure people can breathe and drink water and such and not die. So that's what's going on with the executive branch agencies, the cabinet, the various departments. Under the president's control, or also advising the president, is the executive office of the president. The executive office of the president you can think of as the president's policy wing. It's the president's advisors, the president's eyes and ears, the people that help deliver information to the president. Oftentimes, more formally, they work through the White House staff. So the executive office of the president collects all this policy data, makes recommendations, things like that, and the White House staff says, let me take that from you and let me show it to the president. But we don't need to complicate it that much. It's just the executive office of the president, president eyes and ears. They investigate what would happen if we raise taxes to 100% of people's income if you make more than $10,000 a year. Say Obama says, you know what, I don't think anybody should make more than $10,000 a year. Let's cap it. Let's tax everything else. The executive office will go down there and run some reports, do some investigating, and then come back and say, that was a waste of our time. This is a terrible idea. More than likely. And then the president will go, oh, I did not know that. Well, give me another alternative where we can tax people heavily to build a great big statue to my name. I think that's likely something Obama would do, right? Totally. Anyway, he will look to the executive office to know what's happening in the world, essentially, and to give him options for what to do in the world. And the office would have to respond to the president's kind of political agenda, wishes, things like that. Obama's in the White House. You're not going to have the executive office coming to him and giving him Ayn Randian policy positions. That's not going to happen. Mitt Romney's in the White House. Maybe. Paul Ryan's in the White House. Yeah. Ron Paul's in the White House. You're probably not going to have an executive office of the president. It's just going to be him with a shotgun out in the White House lawn telling other people to get off his property and saying, fend for yourselves. I got my land. Go get your own land and be self-sufficient. It's probably what Ron Paul would say. It's a joke. Anyway, okay, so that's the executive office of the president, and we have the cabinet, and we have the executive office of the president, because the president needs to know things that are going on in the world. The executive office of the president does that. However, the president's very busy and can't run the government like on a day-to-day basis, and that's what the presidential cabinet does. Ta-da! So, I guess the big major last thing is the president's got this tyrannical dictatorial power known as the executive order. It's the frightening thing that basically destroys democracy and bald eagles and everything that's light and good and just in the world. The bald eagle killing presidential power, executive order, is a way for the president to directly exercise control over the executive branch, kind of bypassing his appointees, to have the branch that he's in control of do things that conform to what he wants them to do, which is why people elected him to be there. So, the key thing, though, with executive orders is they have to be within the president's constitutional authority and within the president's or the executive branch's statutory authority. So Congress says, executive branch, what is the executive branch going to do? Congress says, executive branch, I want you to publish some books. Look, books. Alright? Make books. The executive branch goes, okay, cool. But Congress just said make books. How do you know which books to make? We got two amazing different books here. Does the executive branch spend all of its time printing Milton Friedman's Capitalism and Freedom? Or does it spend all of its time printing John Maynard Keynes' General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money? These are two amazing reads that everybody should just read one of these two because the other one's crap. But which one does the executive branch print? Congress didn't say. Maybe the executive branch should print Dog Whistle Politics. Congress didn't say which one to do. Women in Thailand? Women Politics in Thailand, maybe? So the head of the department that prints books will make the decision as to what books they're going to print, what they're going to do. Right? Let's say they decide we're going to print these books here. We got Dog Whistle Politics, How Coded Racial Appears Have Reinvented Racism and Wrecked the Middle Class. You'll be reading a section out of this later on. They say we're going to print John Maynard Keynes and we're going to print Milton Friedman. That's the decisions that the executive branch is making based upon authority delegated to it from Congress. Alright? Obama steps in legitimately, like he can do this, and it's not a tyrannical, crazy abuse of power. Obama says, you know what? I'm head of the executive branch. I'm responsible for everything that happens. It's my authority and prerogative to decide what the executive branch does. You know what? Milton Friedman, sure, he won a economic Nobel Prize in economics, but he's kind of sad. He was a big fan of Augusto Pinochet, who killed lots of people. So Obama says, you know what? Screw him. We're not reading him anymore. Let's just print these two lefty Bibles, right? Because I'm a crazy socialist communist and I want everybody to be indoctrinated. So let's just print these two and let's not worry about Milton Friedman. President can issue an executive order doing that. Totally fine, because Congress just told the executive branch to print books, didn't tell them which ones to print. So the executive branch gets to make that decision, and the president can make that decision for the executive branch by issuing an executive order. A more realistic, less insane example than that would be weed. Okay. So Obama, the Department of Justice runs around and arrests people because sometimes people like to smoke pot. Obama issued an executive order telling the Department of Justice to not enforce federal drug laws, federal marijuana laws in states where it was legal to smoke pot. So, Colorado and Washington? You can smoke it recreationally? I think there's only 2 right now. I think it's medicinal in all the other states. Regardless, Obama says, Executive Order, Justice Department, don't enforce the marijuana laws in the states where they've passed an amendment or laws saying that it can be recreationally enjoyed. Instead, just enforce the federal laws in states where it's still illegal. Obama can do that. It's perfectly fine, constitutional. Every other president has done something like that in some way. You may say, why can the president ignore some laws? How dare he? Congress passed law. He should be enforcing all the laws Congress passes. Kind of, yes. In a way, the president is still enforcing the law because he's didn't tell the Department of Justice not to ever enforce marijuana laws. He just said, concentrate, put your resources into enforcing them in the states where it's still illegal, and not in the states where it's legal. The executive department has limited resources, limited money, limited people, limited time. So you need to prioritize certain projects. The president can prioritize things within his within his constitutional scope and within his statutory scope He can issue executive orders within those 2 restraints to prioritize what the government does. Ta-da! There's other stuff on the slide, self-explanatory, I think, or you can look it up. Serious stuff, there's some links to it on there. I'm pretty sure there are links to the right thing. Otherwise, you can just Google Syria, September 2013. Make sure you get the 2013 stuff, not the 2014 stuff. But anyway, alright, cool. That's the president. Later.